On Thanksgiving Day, I arrived at my daughter's house unannounced and saw my grandson shivering outside in 15-degree weather, wearing nothing but a thin t-shirt and shorts. His lips were blue, his arms wrapped around himself, and his small body shook with every gust of icy wind. Inside, through the glowing windows, I saw shadows moving, the sound of laughter, and clinking glasses carried faintly through the frosted air. The smell of roasted turkey drifted across the yard. They were feasting, warm and comfortable, while my grandson was left out here like a stray dog. My blood froze. Rage, hot, volcanic, unrelenting, surged through me. I stormed up the steps, my boots crunching the snow beneath me, and when I saw his wide, desperate eyes meet mine, something inside me snapped. My hand slammed against the door harder than I ever thought my old body could manage, and as the wood rattled under my fist, 6 words ripped out of me like thunder. "Have you completely lost your minds?" The voices inside fell silent. Forks froze midair, and when that door finally opened, every face at the table turned pale. But that was only the beginning. They had no idea what was coming. Let me take you back a little, because stories like these don't erupt out of nowhere. They're built over years of cracks, small betrayals, silent choices, until finally the dam breaks. My name is William Carter, 68 years old, retired factory worker, widower. Spent my entire life with grease under my nails and steel in my lungs, building parts for machines that outlived me, all so my family would never know hunger the way I once did. Family was everything. My wife, Martha, God rest her soul, used to say, "William, we may not have much, but if we've got each other, we've got enough." And for 40 years she was right. But then she was gone. Cancer. 6 months before that Thanksgiving, she slipped away, and I was left with silence so heavy it could crush a man. The only thing that kept me breathing was my daughter, Leona, and my grandson, Caleb. Leona had married young against her mother's advice. Her husband, Wilbur, was the kind of man who always wore pressed shirts and a smirk that said he thought he was better than you. From the start, I didn't trust him. But Martha, ever the peacemaker, urged patience. For Leona's sake, she'd whisper, touching my hand, "Try to get along." So I did. I bit my tongue through his snide comments, his flashy bragging, his subtle ways of pushing me out of conversations. I told myself my daughter's happiness mattered more than my pride. But deep down I knew that man was poison. My grandson Caleb was the light of my life. A quiet boy, thoughtful, always watching, too polite for his own good. From the time he was little, he'd cling to my leg at barbecues, follow me into the garage while I worked on the truck, ask endless questions about how engines worked or why the stars looked brighter in the country. But as the years passed, I noticed changes. He grew quieter, shadows under his eyes, bruises explained away with flimsy excuses. Fell off my bike, bumped into the door. Practice accident. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe my daughter's home was safe. Still, something gnawed at me. One summer, I took him fishing at Lake Erie. He caught his first bass, grinned so wide I thought his face might split in two. But when the sun dipped low and it was time to drive him home, he grew restless, fidgeting with his sleeves, glancing at me like he wanted to say something but couldn't. "Everything all right, son?" I asked. He forced a smile. "Yeah, Grandpa, I wish we could stay longer." I told myself it was because he liked the lake. But in my gut, I knew it was because he didn't want to go home. That Thanksgiving, I woke up alone in my too-quiet house. The table was bare, the air still. No Martha humming in the kitchen. No laughter from Caleb, just the tick of the old wall clock and the ache in my chest. Around 2:30 in the afternoon, I got a text from my neighbor. "Saw police at the Hendersons again. Domestic situation. Made me think of you and your family worries." I stared at those words for a long time. Family worries. God, if only she knew. The clock ticked on. 245, 250. Finally, I grabbed my coat, tossed 2 gift bags into the passenger seat, one with a leather baseball glove I'd spent too much on, the other with comic books. Caleb still pretended he was too old for, and slid into my old Chevrolet. The engine coughed to life. Snow was already falling, fat flakes sticking to the windshield. The radio crackled, the same classic rock station Martha and I used to sing along to. Led Zeppelin's heavy riffs matched the storm brewing in my chest. The drive to Leona's house should have taken 45 minutes. That day it felt like a pilgrimage. The roads were slick, other cars crawling along, hazard lights flashing like fireflies. I kept both hands on the wheel, jaw tight, heart heavier with every mile. Martha's voice echoed in my memory. "Family is all we have left, William." I wanted to believe that, but what I found when I pulled into their driveway proved me wrong. The house glowed like a postcard. Blue siding dusted with snow, white shutters, Christmas lights twinkling across the porch. Smoke curled from the chimney. Warmth radiated from the windows. And there on the front steps sat my grandson. Caleb's arms hugged his knees, his shirt soaked with snow, his body trembling so violently I thought he might collapse. His lips were purple, his skin pale. He looked less like a boy and more like a ghost clinging to the last scraps of warmth. "Jesus Christ," I muttered, flinging open the truck door. The wind slapped me in the face, needles of ice biting my skin. I trudged through the snow as fast as my old legs would carry me. "Caleb!" I shouted. "What the hell are you doing out here?" He looked up, and the relief in his eyes nearly broke me. His teeth chattered as he whispered, "Grandpa." I stripped off my heavy coat and wrapped it around him, pulling him into my arms. He was ice cold, too cold. "What do you mean you're not allowed in?" I demanded, already guiding him toward the truck. His small voice cracked. "Wilbur said I ruined Thanksgiving. Said I had to sit out here until I learned responsibility." My vision blurred with rage. Through the glowing windows I could see shadows laughing, hear faint music. They were inside, celebrating, while this boy, my blood, was left to freeze. I wanted to kick the door down right then, drag Wilbur out by his smug collar, and teach him what real consequences looked like. But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I pulled Caleb into the cab of my truck, cranked the heat and held his shaking hands between mine. "Talk to me, son," I said, my voice trembling with the effort to stay calm. "What happened today?" And as he began to tell me, the story that unfolded shattered what little faith I still had in my daughter's home. The door slammed shut behind us, muffling the sound of Wilbur's mocking laughter, though his voice still rang in my ears like a hammer on steel. "He's 18. If he doesn't like my rules, he can leave." I gripped Caleb's shoulder as we stepped back into the biting air. Snow whirled like ash around us, blanketing the ground faster than my boots could crunch it down. My old truck idled in the driveway, exhaust curling into the gray evening sky. Caleb's duffel bag hung from his shoulder, stuffed hastily with what little he could carry. The boy's eyes flicked back toward the house, then to me. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but no words came. Only a faint tremble in his jaw, a mix of cold fear and disbelief. "Come on, son," I murmured, ushering him toward the truck. "Let's get you warm." I opened the passenger door and Caleb climbed in without hesitation this time. The door groaned as it shut, sealing him inside where the heater blasted warm air. His hands hovered over the vents, fingers twitching as if they had forgotten what heat felt like. I rounded the hood and slid into the driver's seat. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the hum of the heater and the faint strains of Led Zeppelin still playing on the radio. Finally, Caleb whispered, "He's going to come after us." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, the cracked leather creaking under my knuckles. Let him try. We pulled out of the driveway, tires crunching over fresh snow. My headlights carved twin tunnels through the darkness. illuminating the swirling flakes that danced like restless spirits. Behind us, Leona's house grew smaller until it disappeared entirely into the white curtain. I glanced at Caleb. He was staring straight ahead, jaw clenched, coat pulled tightly around him. In the dim glow of the dashboard lights, I could see the purple shadows under his eyes, the hollows of his cheeks. A boy forced to grow up too fast. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," I said gently. "You're safe with me." His eyes flicked toward me, hesitant, almost unbelieving. "Safe? For how long?" "He always finds a way. He twists everything. Mom? She'll defend him. She always does." I swallowed hard. Memories surged. Leona as a little girl, running barefoot through the yard, laughing as Martha chased her with a water hose. That girl had grown into a woman I hardly recognized, one who stood by silently as her own son was abused. "I should have seen it," I admitted, voice thick. "All the signs were there, and I let myself believe her excuses." "I failed you, Caleb." His head snapped toward me, eyes wide. "No, Grandpa. You didn't fail me. You came. You showed up. That's more than anyone else has ever done." The words nearly broke me. I blinked hard, keeping my eyes on the road. The storm worsened as we drove. Snow plastered itself against the windshield faster than the wipers could push it aside. I slowed, hands firm on the wheel, every muscle tense. Beside me, Caleb finally began to talk. Not just the clipped confessions from earlier, but the whole ugly story spilling out in pieces. He spoke of nights locked in the garage, teeth chattering until his lips bled. Of standing in the corner for hours, forbidden to sit, while Wilbur drank in front of the television. Of being told he was worthless, a burden, a stain on the family. And always, always, his mother's silence. "She'd look at me," Caleb whispered, staring out at the snow. Her eyes would soften like she wanted to say something. But then Wilbur would glare at her and she'd just look away, every time. The shame in his voice tore at me. A boy should never have to question if his own mother loved him. "Listen to me," I said firmly, reaching across the seat to grip his hand. "Her silence is not your fault. None of this is your fault." He bit his lip, nodding, though I could see the doubt etched into his face. Years of cruelty don't vanish with a few words, but maybe, just maybe, I could start to mend what Wilbur had broken. When we finally pulled into my driveway, the storm had blanketed everything in white. My little ranch house looked like something from a Christmas card, warm light spilling from the porch lamp, smoke curling from the chimney. Martha's touch lingered in every detail, the wreath she had woven from pine cones, the ceramic snowman in the window. I killed the engine and turned to Caleb. "Welcome home." He blinked at me, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Home?" "Yes," I said simply. "This is your home now." We carried his bag inside. The familiar scent of coffee and Martha's lavender sachets filled the air, wrapping us both in a cocoon of comfort. I led him down the hall to the guest room, where one of Martha's quilts lay folded neatly on the bed. Caleb touched the quilt with trembling fingers, tracing the careful stitching. "Grandma made this?" "She made it for you," I said softly. "Said one day you'd need a place that felt like yours." For the first time since I'd arrived at Leona's house, Caleb smiled. It was small, fragile, but real. Later, we sat by the fireplace, mugs of hot chocolate warming our hands. Caleb told me about college, his dream of becoming a mechanical engineer, just like I'd been before retirement. His voice grew steadier as he spoke of classes, of friends, of guitars and comic books. I listened, nodding, pride swelling in my chest. This boy, my grandson, still had hope inside him, buried but not destroyed. "We'll get your tuition sorted," I promised. "You won't have to worry about Wilbur or his money. You'll have everything you need." Caleb's eyes glistened. "But Grandpa, won't it be hard for you? You're all ready." Don't finish that sentence, I interrupted gently. You're not a burden. You never were. Family takes care of family, always. The fire crackled, filling the silence with warmth. For a moment, it felt like Martha was there, watching us, approving. We had just finished a simple dinner, roast chicken and vegetables, when the peace shattered. A pounding knock rattled the front door, sharp and authoritative. Caleb froze, mug halfway to his lips. His eyes widened in terror. "Grandpa," he whispered. I rose slowly, every bone in my body suddenly heavy. My gut told me who it was before I even reached the door. 3 more knocks, louder, insistent. A voice followed. "Mr. Burke, police! We need to speak with you." Caleb's mug slipped from his hands, shattering against the floor. He backed away, shaking his head. He called them. He said he would. I set my jaw and moved to the door. Through the peephole I saw them, 2 officers in dark uniforms, their breath fogging in the cold. And behind them, like vultures waiting for scraps, stood Wilbur and Leona. Wilbur's face was smug, twisted with triumph. Leona's eyes were downcast, but her presence there was enough to twist the knife. I opened the door just enough to speak, keeping my body between them and Caleb. "What can I do for you, officers?" I asked, voice calm but firm. Wilbur lunged forward, pointing an accusing finger at me. "That man kidnapped my stepson. He broke into my house, assaulted me, and dragged the boy away against his will." The officers raised their hands, motioning for calm. The lead officer spoke. "Sir, we need to sort this out. Is there a young man named Caleb Green on these premises?" Behind me, Caleb stepped into view. His face was pale, but his voice, though trembling, was clear. "I'm here, and I'm not kidnapped. I want to stay with my grandfather." Wilbur's face contorted with rage. "He's lying." "That old man has poisoned him against us." The officer turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Burke, we're going to need everyone to come inside so we can discuss this properly." I stepped aside reluctantly, heart pounding, as the officers entered my home. Caleb clutched my arm like a lifeline. Behind them, Wilbur crossed the threshold with the arrogance of a man who thought the law was on his side. Leona trailed behind, her face pale, her eyes flickering between me and her son. The warmth of my home seemed to vanish in an instant, replaced by the cold presence of confrontation. And I knew this was only the beginning. The truth is about to come out. But will Leona stay silent again or finally stand up? And will Wilbur's lies collapse? Or drag Caleb down with them? The living room had never felt so small. The fire still crackled in the hearth, casting warm light over the faded furniture, but the warmth seemed hollow now. Cold tension filled the space instead, thick and suffocating. 2 uniformed officers stood near the center of the room, their radios crackling faintly, the scent of damp snow clinging to their coats. One was middle-aged, with tired eyes and a clipped voice that hinted at years of dealing with domestic disputes. The other was younger, posture stiff, eager to prove himself. Behind them loomed Wilbur, his chest puffed like a rooster, confidence radiating off him in waves, and trailing at his side was Leona, my daughter, her green scarf pulled tight around her neck as though it might protect her from the storm raging inside. She refused to look at me or at Caleb. Caleb stayed close, nearly pressed against my side. His hand clutched my sleeve, knuckles white. He didn't need to speak. I could feel his fear in the way his body trembled. The lead officer cleared his throat. "All right, let's start from the top. Mr. Burke." He nodded toward me. "Mr. Green here says you forcibly removed his stepson from his home." "That's a lie," I shot back, my voice steady but firm. "I didn't kidnap anyone. I rescued my grandson from abuse." Wilbur barked out a laugh, the kind that dripped with arrogance. "Abuse? Is that what we're calling discipline now?" "Officer, this boy has been nothing but trouble. He burned the Thanksgiving turkey, ruined the whole dinner. I told him to sit outside to cool off. That's all." 4 hours, I said sharply, stepping forward. "He left Caleb outside for 4 hours in freezing weather. No coat, no gloves, nothing." The younger officer frowned, glancing toward Caleb. "Is that true, son?" Caleb's lips parted, but no words came. His eyes darted to Wilbur, then to his mother, then back to me. His chest rose and fell rapidly, as though the weight of speaking might crush him. I squeezed his shoulder gently. "Tell the truth, Caleb, you're safe here." Finally he whispered, "Yes, since 11 this morning. Until Grandpa came." Wilbur sneered. "He's exaggerating as usual. Always looking for sympathy. It was maybe an hour, and he was dressed fine. This is what I deal with, officers, lies and dramatics." The lead officer scribbled in his notebook. "Mrs. Green?" He turned to Leona. "Can you confirm what happened today?" All eyes shifted to her. Leona froze, her gaze fixed on the floor. Her hands twisted together nervously. I knew that look, the look of a woman torn in two. She had worn it the day she married Wilbur. When she asked me not to object, not to make things harder, I had stayed silent then. Maybe that was my first mistake. "Mrs. Green," the officer prompted again, "did your husband instruct your son to stay outside?" Leona swallowed hard. Her lips trembled. For a moment I thought she might finally speak the truth. But then Wilbur shifted beside her, his hand brushing her arm in a subtle but unmistakable warning. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Caleb tends to exaggerate. It wasn't as bad as he's making it sound." Caleb's head snapped toward her, betrayal written all over his face. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Only a sharp inhale that seemed to wound him deeper than any blow could. I felt something inside me snap. "Exaggerate." My voice thundered through the room. I found him blue-lipped, shaking like a leaf. After 4 hours in sub-freezing weather. That's not exaggeration, that's survival. The younger officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner. The older one held up a hand. "Everyone calm down. We're here to establish facts." "Facts?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "The fact is my grandson could have died today, and his mother stood by and did nothing." Leona flinched as though I had struck her. Her eyes glistened, but she said nothing. The older officer turned his gaze on Wilbur. "Sir, locking someone outside in this weather is dangerous." "Do you understand that?" Wilbur puffed up further, his arrogance unshaken. "He's 18, a legal adult. He's under my roof, so he follows my rules. If he can't, then he faces consequences. That's parenting." "That's abuse," I shot back, my voice low and cold. "And you damn well know it." The officer scribbled more notes, his brow furrowed. "Mr. Burke, do you have any proof of ongoing mistreatment?" I hesitated. Proof. That was the problem. Abusers like Wilbur knew how to keep their cruelty behind closed doors, how to twist the narrative until the victim looked like the problem. But then I remembered. "Caleb," I said gently, "show them your arms." His eyes widened. "Grandpa." "Please," I urged softly. With trembling fingers, he pulled up his sleeves. Dark bruises marred his pale skin, old ones fading yellow, fresh ones stark and purple, finger-shaped, unmistakable. The officers leaned closer. The younger one muttered under his breath. The older officer's jaw tightened. "Where did those come from, son?" he asked. Caleb's voice was barely a whisper. "Wilbur." Wilbur stepped forward, face red. "That's a lie." "He bruises easy, always bumping into things, clumsy as hell. He's using those marks to make me look like a monster." But his voice lacked the same steady arrogance now. Cracks were forming. The officers turned to Leona again. "Mrs. Green, is what your son says true? Has your husband physically harmed him?" But something shifted in that moment. Maybe it was the sight of her son's bruises under the harsh living room light. Maybe it was the realization that the law was standing in her father's house, listening, watching. Tears welled in her eyes. She opened her mouth, and then Wilbur's voice sliced through the air like a knife. "Leona," he hissed, "think about what you're doing. You'll ruin everything. The house, the money, your life. You'll lose it all." Her body shook. For a second, I thought she would fold, the way she always had. But then she looked at Caleb, really looked at him, at the bruises, at his trembling hands, at the boy she had brought into this world, and the man she had allowed to destroy him. Her voice cracked, but it came out clear. "It's true." Silence fell like a hammer. The officers froze, pens hovering above notepads. Caleb gasped, his entire body stiffening. I felt a rush of pride and grief all at once. Leona's tears spilled freely now. "He's made Caleb sleep in the garage, locked him in the basement, controlled everything. When he eats, when he showers, when he speaks. And today he left him outside for hours. He said it would teach him responsibility." Wilbur's face turned a mottled red. "You lying?" "Enough." The lead officer's voice cut sharp. He stepped forward, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Sir, turn around and place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for child endangerment and abuse." The room erupted. Wilbur shouted, thrashing, "This is ridiculous. She's hysterical. They're all lying."
"I'll ruin you all!"
Caleb pressed against me, eyes wide in terror. Leona sobbed openly, her hands covering her face, and as the officers wrestled Wilbur toward the door, his voice rose above the chaos, venomous and filled with rage. "You think this is over, old man?" he snarled, his eyes locked on me. "You haven't won. I'll come back. And when I do, I'll take everything from you." The officers shoved him outside, his curses muffled by the slamming of the squad car door. But his words lingered in the room, hanging heavy in the silence he left behind. Wilbur is arrested, but his threat hangs in the air. Caleb is safe for the night, but can William protect him from what's coming next? The flashing red and blue lights outside, William's modest home, finally faded into the snow as the police car carrying Wilbur disappeared down the icy road. The air still smelled faintly of exhaust and winter salt, mingling with the warmth of the house behind him. William stood on the porch longer than he needed to, one hand braced against the wooden frame of the doorway, his chest rising and falling like a man who'd just fought a war and survived, barely. Inside, the house had gone quiet. Too quiet. Amos sat curled on the couch, wrapped in one of Martha's old quilts, his hands still trembling slightly, though the heater hummed, and the fireplace spat golden light. Leona hovered near the corner of the room, her eyes red and swollen, staring at her son like she had only just noticed him for the first time in years. The little girl, Wilbur's daughter from his previous marriage, sat silently in a chair, hugging a stuffed rabbit with ears frayed from years of comfort. For a long time, nobody spoke. The only sound was the crackle of firewood. Finally, William shut the door, locking it with deliberate finality, as if to keep the shadows of the past from ever creeping back in. He leaned his back against it and closed his eyes. His voice, when it came, was gravel. "It's over. For tonight." But even as he said it, a flicker of doubt twisted in his gut. Men like Wilbur didn't surrender quietly. His face twisted with venom as the police snapped cold steel around his wrists. Replayed in William's mind. "You'll regret this betrayal. You'll lose everything." No, it wasn't over, not yet. Leona's voice cracked the silence. "Dad?" Her tone was small, childlike. "What if they release him? What if he comes back?" William opened his eyes, fixing her with a stare that was both stern and weary. "Then we'll be ready." Amos flinched at the word ready. For 3 years, ready had meant bracing for Wilbur's footsteps. The slam of a door, the booming commands that dictated his every move. He pulled the quilt tighter around himself, sinking deeper into the couch cushions, his breath unsteady. William crossed the room slowly and lowered himself beside his grandson, "You're safe here," he said gently. "This is your home now." Amos nodded, but his eyes betrayed him. Safe was a foreign word, a language he hadn't spoken in years. His gaze kept darting toward the window, half expecting headlights to sweep across the driveway, half expecting the door to explode inward again. William placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. It was firm, grounding. "He's not going to hurt you again. Not while I'm breathing." The night stretched on, thick with tension. Neighbors had seen the police, of course. In small towns, word traveled faster than wildfire. William's phone buzzed with curious messages. "Saw the cops at your place. Everything okay?" He ignored them all. This wasn't gossip. This was survival. At nearly midnight, when Amos had finally dozed off against the arm of the couch, William carried him down the hallway to the guest room. He tucked the quilt around his grandson and stood in the doorway, watching the boy's chest rise and fall in the steady rhythm of sleep. For the first time all day, Amos looked peaceful. Fragile but peaceful. Leona appeared behind him, her steps hesitant. Her face was streaked with dried tears. Her mascara smudged into dark crescents under her eyes. She looked like someone hollowed out from the inside. "Dad," she whispered, I don't know how to fix this." William didn't turn. His eyes stayed on Amos. "You start by telling the truth. Every time. No more protecting him. No more excuses. Amos needs you to be his mother again." Leona's lips trembled. "I thought, if I stayed quiet, if I kept the peace, it would protect him, that Wilbur would calm down, that it was just discipline. But I was wrong. God, I was so wrong." William finally turned to her. His gaze was sharp, unflinching. "You weren't wrong, Leona. You were weak. And weakness is what men like Wilbur feed on." Her breath hitched. The words were harsh, but they were true, and she knew it. She lowered her head like a child caught stealing. William softened just slightly. His voice grew quieter, weighted with both pain and love. "But weakness doesn't have to define you. You've got a chance now. A chance to stand up for your son, to undo what you let happen. Don't waste it." Leona nodded, tears spilling again. But this time they weren't just of shame. They were of resolve, faint but growing. At 2 a.m. the phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the silence like a blade. William's hand shot out before Amos could stir, and he snatched the receiver from its cradle. "Hello?" A pause, then a voice, smooth, calm, too calm. "Mr. Burke?" William's grip tightened. "Who is this?" "You know who this is." A chuckle, low and venomous. "You think handcuffs can hold me? You think you've won?" William's blood turned to ice. "Wilbur, you get one warning," William growled. "Stay away from my family." "Family?" Wilbur sneered. "You mean my wife and my house? My stepson who needed discipline? You think you can steal them from me?" His tone dropped, colder than the snow falling outside. "You haven't seen the last of me, old man. Not by a long shot." The line went dead. William stood there in the dark kitchen. The receiver pressed to his ear long after the call ended. His reflection in the window looked back at him, lined with rage and fear in equal measure. He placed the phone back on the hook slowly, deliberately, as though setting down a loaded gun. The next morning, the world outside was white with fresh snow. Amos woke to the smell of pancakes, a smell he hadn't known in years. William stood at the stove, flipping them with practiced ease, the sizzle of butter filling the air. It was ordinary, comforting, healing. But beneath the surface, tension simmered. Every knock at the door, every sound of tires crunching on the street outside, made Amos stiffen, made Leona glance nervously at the window. William said nothing of the phone call, not yet. But the fire in his eyes burned hotter than the one in the hearth. He knew what Wilbur was capable of. And he knew one thing with deadly certainty. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. Wilbur's out on bail. He's calling, threatening, and preparing to strike back harder than ever. William must decide, stay on defense, or take the fight directly to Wilbur before he destroys them all. The house was quiet, almost too quiet after the officers left. William stood by the window, watching the tail lights of the squad car disappear into the snowy night. His breath fogged the glass faintly, though the warmth inside was steady. Behind him, Amos sat on the edge of the couch, still wrapped in the old quilt, his eyes following his grandfather's every move as if the boy feared the silence would suddenly break and the nightmare would come crashing back. For a long while, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady crackle of the fireplace and the ticking of the mantel clock. William's thoughts swirled like a storm, anger at Wilbur, guilt for not having acted sooner, grief for the years Amos had lost to fear. Every memory of his late wife, Martha, echoed through the silence. Her voice, calm and steady, reminding him, "Family is all we have, William. Protect them even when it costs you." He closed his eyes. Protecting Amos had cost him his daughter tonight. But as he looked back at the boy, pale and trembling, William knew he had no regrets. "Grandpa?" Amos's voice was hesitant, barely above a whisper. William turned. "Yes, son?" Amos stared down at his hands. Do you think I'm weak for not fighting back sooner?" The question twisted like a knife. William walked over, lowering himself beside his grandson. He put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You are not weak, Amos. You're one of the strongest young men I've ever met. Strength isn't about fists or shouting. It's about surviving what should have broken you. You've done that for years." Amos's lip trembled. His eyes shone, not just from tears, but from something deeper, relief at being believed. "He always told me I was useless, that Mom only kept me because she felt guilty, that no one would ever want me." William's jaw tightened. Rage burned hot in his chest, but he kept his voice steady. "He lied, you hear me? Every word out of that man's mouth was poison. You are wanted. You are loved by me. By your grandmother, God rest her. And one day, by people who see your worth the way we always did." For the first time all evening, Amos allowed himself to lean into William, resting his head against his grandfather's shoulder. The old man wrapped his arm around him, steady and protective. They sat like that until the fire burned low, two survivors of a storm finding shelter in each other's presence. The next morning dawned gray and brittle. Snow still lay heavy on the streets, but the storm had passed. William was up early, frying bacon and eggs, the smell filling the small house. Amos wandered into the kitchen, hair tousled, looking younger than his 18 years in William's oversized flannel shirt. "Morning," William greeted warmly. "Hungry?" Amos nodded, sliding into a chair. His eyes roamed the kitchen, the photographs on the fridge, the familiar mugs on the counter. "I always loved it here," he admitted softly. "It felt safe. Like Mom and I used to be before." His voice trailed off. "Before Wilbur," William finished for him. Amos nodded silently. William set a plate in front of him. "Then this is where you'll stay. For as long as you need. No one is going to hurt you here." The boy picked up his fork but hesitated. "He's not going to just let me go, Grandpa. You know that, right? He'll find a way to get me back under his control. He always does." William met his gaze. "Not this time. Last night changed things. The law's involved now, and I won't let him near you again." But even as he spoke, William knew it wasn't that simple. Men like Wilbur didn't surrender. They doubled down, manipulated, twisted truth until everyone else bent. And Leona, his daughter's silence haunted him. She'd chosen Wilbur over Amos for years. Would she fight for her husband again now? As if summoned by thought, the phone rang. William's hand tightened on the receiver when he saw the caller ID, Leona. Amos froze. His fork clattered to the plate. "Don't answer," he whispered. William hesitated. His heart ached for his daughter, but his grandson's fear spoke volumes. He picked up the phone, pressing it to his ear. "Leona." Her voice was raw, trembling. "Dad, please listen. You have to bring Amos back. You can't keep him from me." William's jaw clenched. "I didn't keep him from you. You let Wilbur lock him outside in the freezing cold for 4 hours. Don't you dare put this on me." Silence on the other end, then a broken sob. I know I should have stopped it, but you don't understand what it's like living with him. He'll destroy me if I stand against him." William's voice hardened. "And what about your son?" "He's been destroyed piece by piece under that man's roof. Did you think I wouldn't see it? Did you think Amos wouldn't break eventually?" "Dad, please." Leona's desperation cracked through the line. "If you don't bring him back, Wilbur will press charges. He'll make sure you lose everything. And I can't—" William's patience snapped. "Leona, open your eyes. You already lost something. You lost your boy's trust. And if you don't stand up now, you'll lose him forever." He hung up before she could answer. His hand trembled slightly as he set the phone down. Across the table, Amos was staring at him, eyes wide with fear and hope tangled together. "She's not going to choose me, is she?" Amos asked quietly. William swallowed hard. "I don't know, son, but I promise you this, I will." That day, William drove Amos to the college campus to speak with a financial aid counselor. They walked across the snow-dusted quad, Amos keeping his head low, his body language cautious, as if he expected Wilbur to leap out from behind a building. William kept close, a steady presence at his side. Inside the office, the counselor smiled warmly as they explained the situation. With William's support, Amos could qualify for additional aid and even a part-time work-study job. Amos listened, still uncertain, but William noticed the way his shoulders slowly lifted, as if a burden had lightened. William listened, every detail carving fresh lines of guilt into his heart, but he didn't interrupt. He let the boy's voice spill out years of silence, nodding, squeezing his hand when the tears came. When Amos finished, he looked exhausted but strangely lighter, like the confession itself had freed him. William leaned forward. "None of that was your fault. You hear me? Not one bit. That man will pay for what he's done." That night, as they sat by the fire, William's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Leona. It was a number he didn't recognize. Against his better judgment, he answered. Wilbur's voice slithered through the line. "Calm. Too calm. Old man, you think you've won something. But you haven't. Amos is mine. And if you don't hand him over, you'll regret it." William's hand tightened on the receiver. "He's not yours. He never was. And if you come near him again, I'll see to it you rot behind bars." Wilbur chuckled, low and dangerous. "We'll see about that." The line went dead. William stared at the phone in his hand. Amos watched him from the couch, his face pale. It was him, wasn't it? "Yes," William said, setting the phone down carefully. His voice was steady, but inside a storm raged. "But don't worry, son. He won't touch you again. I won't let him." He looked into the fire, the flames reflecting in his eyes. He had saved Amos once. But Wilbur wasn't finished. William knew the real battle was only beginning. A battle not just for his grandson's future, but for the soul of his fractured family. And this time William would not back down. The fire had burned low by the time William finally rose from his chair. The flames flickered like restless spirits, shadows stretching long across the walls of the living room. Amos had fallen asleep on the couch, his body curled tightly as if bracing for a blow even in his dreams. William gently pulled the quilt higher over his grandson's shoulders and stood in silence, listening to the quiet hum of the furnace, the soft ticking of the mantel clock, and the distant wind moaning outside the old windows. But inside William there was no peace. Wilbur's voice still echoed in his ears. "Amos is mine." That single sentence had carried a promise, not of love, not of protection, but of control, cruelty, and possession. The man truly believed he owned Amos, and that belief made him dangerous. William moved to his desk in the corner, pulling open drawers and gathering papers, receipts, notes, phone records he had been quietly keeping for months, ever since he had begun to notice bruises on Amos's arms, hollow shadows under the boy's eyes, and that unnatural silence whenever Wilbur entered the room. William had started documenting. He hadn't told Amos, not wanting to give him false hope, but he had sensed this day would come. Tonight confirmed it. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a war. The next morning, William woke to the smell of coffee. Amos was already in the kitchen, pouring 2 steaming mugs. He looked tired, the weight of years still pressing on him, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes. "I didn't sleep much," Amos admitted, handing William a cup. "Kept thinking about what he said on the phone. He's not going to let me go, Grandpa. You know that, right?" William nodded, sipping the coffee. "I know. But knowing it doesn't mean we're powerless. He wants you afraid. He wants us divided. We won't give him that satisfaction." Amos leaned on the counter, his voice low. "He always wins, though. Always. Mom bends to him. The neighbors believe his lies. Even the teachers stopped asking questions after a while because he made them feel stupid. How do we fight someone like that?" William set the mug down and looked his grandson straight in the eye. "With truth, with proof, and with the one thing he doesn't have, a family that won't give up on you." For the first time in years, Amos smiled faintly. It was small, fragile, but it was there. The day passed in uneasy normalcy. William worked quietly in his study while Amos flipped through old photo albums, tracing the images of his grandmother, his mother as a child, and even himself as a toddler sitting on William's lap. The photos seemed to anchor him, reminding him that his life was more than Wilbur's control. But just as the sun dipped low, painting the snow in hues of orange and pink, headlights flared in the driveway. William's stomach knotted. He stood at the window, jaw clenched, as a sleek black SUV rolled to a stop. Amos froze on the couch. "It's him," he whispered, voice trembling. The driver's door opened. Wilbur stepped out, his coat perfectly pressed, his posture exuding smug confidence even in the biting cold. He didn't come to the door right away. Instead, he stood in the driveway, staring at the house as though daring William to stop him. Then the passenger door opened, and Leona emerged. William's heart twisted. His daughter's face was pale, her eyes rimmed red from crying. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, her usual poise crushed under the weight of her husband's dominance. Together they walked to the door. The knock was sharp, deliberate. William opened it slowly, blocking most of the doorway with his frame. "You're not welcome here." Wilbur smirked, the kind of smirk that made William's fists itch. "That's no way to greet your son-in-law. We've come to collect what belongs to us." His eyes slid past William, narrowing as he spotted Amos inside. "Come on, boy. Time to go home." Amos's breath caught. He shook his head, pressing back into the couch. "No." Leona stepped forward, her voice cracking. "Dad, please." "Just let him come with us. We can handle this as a family." William's eyes burned. A family doesn't lock their son in a garage. A family doesn't starve him, silence him, break him. Don't you dare use that word to defend what you've allowed. Wilbur's smirk faltered, replaced with cold steel. "Enough of this nonsense. You've got no legal right to keep him here. He's still under my care, and if you force this, you'll regret it." William leaned closer, lowering his voice until it was a growl. Try me." For a moment, the two men stared each other down. Decades of quiet resentment, cruelty, and unspoken rage hung heavy in the air. Amos trembled in the background, his body taut as a bowstring. Finally, Wilbur stepped back. "Fine," he said smoothly. "Enjoy your little victory tonight, old man. But this isn't over." He turned sharply, guiding Leona back to the SUV. She looked back once, her eyes full of something William couldn't read. Guilt, fear, maybe even regret, before disappearing into the car. The SUV's tires crunched over the snow as it pulled away, leaving silence in its wake. William closed the door, locking it firmly. He turned to Amos, who looked pale and shaken. "You're safe here," William reassured, though even as he said it, doubt gnawed at him. Over the next few days, Wilbur's threats escalated. Phone calls at all hours. Letters slipped under the door. Even strangers loitering near William's property. Men with unfamiliar faces who didn't belong in their quiet town. Amos grew quieter, more anxious. He jumped at every knock, every ringing phone. His nightmares worsened, and sometimes William woke to find him sitting on the floor by the bed, whispering apologies in his sleep. William's heart ached, but his resolve hardened. He began reaching out to old contacts. A retired lawyer he'd once helped with a broken furnace, a police officer who owed him a favor, even the pastor at the local church. Piece by piece, he built a network of allies. If Wilbur thought intimidation would break him, he was wrong. But the pressure was mounting, and William knew that sooner or later, Wilbur would push harder. That push came one night when William and Amos returned from the grocery store. The front door was ajar. William froze on the porch, one arm instinctively shielding Amos behind him. Slowly, he pushed the door open. The house was dark, silent, but inside, the living room was a wreck. Furniture overturned, papers scattered. The old photograph of Martha lay shattered on the floor. Amos gasped. "Grandma's picture?" William's blood boiled. He stepped inside cautiously, checking each room. Whoever had been there was gone. But the message was clear. "We can get to you any time." He called the police, but they found nothing. No fingerprints, no witnesses, just destruction and silence. That night, Amos sat on the couch clutching the broken frame, tears streaming down his face. William sat beside him, his hand steady on the boy's shoulder. "They want us afraid," he said quietly. "But fear is fuel, Amos, and we'll use it to burn their lies to the ground." Amos looked up, his eyes wet but fierce. "Promise me, Grandpa. Promise me we'll end this." William tightened his grip. "I promise." The following days became preparation. William worked tirelessly, gathering every shred of evidence, documenting every threat, and filing every report. He spoke with the lawyer, who assured him that with Amos nearly 18 and proof of abuse, they could push for emancipation, cutting Wilbur's legal hold permanently. But Wilbur wasn't backing down. Rumors spread around town, ugly whispers about William being unstable, about him kidnapping his own grandson, about Amos being troubled. William recognized the hand behind them. Wilbur was poisoning the community just as he had poisoned Leona's loyalty. Yet amid the chaos, something unexpected bloomed. Amos began to change. He spoke more at the dinner table. He laughed, small, uncertain laughs, but laughs nonetheless, when William shared stories about his childhood. He helped repair the broken furniture, his hands steady, learning skills he'd never been allowed to try before. Slowly, painfully, he began to believe that a different life was possible. And William watched with pride, knowing every smile was another victory stolen from Wilbur. But the storm was far from over. One evening, just as the snow began to fall again, William received a letter. No name, no return address. Inside, a single photograph. Amos, taken through the window while he slept on the couch. Beneath it, scrawled in ink, "You can't hide him forever." William's hand shook as he read the words. He knew then that Wilbur wasn't going to wait for courts or laws. The man wanted to break them before justice could intervene. The night outside roared like a wounded beast. Wind howled through the trees, carrying icy pellets of snow that battered against the windows of my old house. The storm was relentless, as if the heavens themselves were mirroring the war raging inside my heart. I sat in my armchair, the fire flickering low, casting shadows across the walls. Amos was dozing on the couch, his head resting on a pillow, wrapped in one of Martha's old quilts. His face looked younger in sleep, softer, but the faint bruises along his jaw were a bitter reminder of the nightmare he'd lived through. I should have been at peace knowing he was safe here. But my gut told me the storm hadn't passed. It was gathering strength. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my coffee mug. Cold now. I hadn't taken a sip in over an hour. My mind kept circling back to Wilbur's face, the smug arrogance, the belief that control was his birthright, that fear was love in disguise. Men like him didn't surrender quietly. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Each second dragged heavy and foreboding. I rose, moved to the window, and peered out into the storm. Headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the snow like blades of light. They grew larger, brighter, until a truck, Wilbur's truck, pulled into my driveway. My blood ran cold. He was here. I didn't wake Amos right away. Instead, I crossed to the front door, my boots thudding softly on the old wooden floor. I checked the lock, solid, but locks meant nothing to a man driven by rage. The engine outside cut off, silence, then the crunch of heavy footsteps in snow. I felt the old familiar weight of fear pressing on my chest, the same fear I'd carried as a boy when my own father would stumble home drunk, fists ready to teach me discipline. The years had dulled many memories, but not that one. Maybe that's why I recognized Wilbur so clearly. He was a mirror of the men I had sworn I'd never become. A shadow moved past the frosted window. Then came the first pounding knock. Boom, boom, boom. The door rattled. Amos stirred on the couch, half awake, blinking against the firelight. "Grandpa?" His voice was groggy, laced with fear. I raised a hand, signaling him to stay quiet. "Stay back, son," I whispered. "Stay behind me." The pounding came again, louder. "Open up, old man!" Wilbur's voice roared through the door. "I know he's in there." Amos froze. I could see the terror flood his eyes, the years of conditioning snapping back in place. His breathing quickened, shallow and ragged. "It's okay," I murmured. "You're safe now." But my own pulse betrayed me, hammering so hard I thought he could hear it. I reached for the phone on the side table, ready to call the police, but the decision was torn from me as the door splintered. Wilbur's boot crashed through the frame, and the door burst inward with a deafening crack. Cold air rushed inside, scattering embers from the fireplace. And there he was, towering, red-faced, snow clinging to his shoulders, eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can steal my family?" Wilbur snarled, his voice a venomous growl. "You think you can take my boy?" "He's not your boy," I said, my voice low but steady. He never was. Amos had shrunk back against the couch, clutching the quilt tighter around himself. But this time he wasn't alone. I stepped forward, planting myself between Wilbur and my grandson. "You come one step closer," I said, "and you'll regret it." Wilbur laughed, a dark mocking sound that filled the room. "Regret, old man? You don't scare me. You've been poisoning him against me, filling his head with lies. He needs discipline, real discipline, not your weak hand." I clenched my fists, nails biting into my palms. "You call freezing him on the porch discipline? Locking him in basements, garages, starving him? That's not discipline, Wilbur. That's abuse, and it ends tonight." His eyes narrowed, and for a heartbeat I thought he might falter. But then his rage reignited, hotter, uglier. "You don't get it, do you? This is my house. My rules, and anyone who doesn't obey... Enough! The word exploded from my chest before I realized I was shouting. Amos flinched, but I stood my ground. This isn't your house. It's not your life to control, and Amos isn't yours to break. He's my grandson, and tonight you answer to me. Wilbur's face twisted with fury. You're a pathetic old relic, clinging to some fantasy of being a hero. You can't save him. You couldn't even save your wife. That cut deeper than any knife. Martha's face flashed in my mind, her laughter, her warmth, the way she used to tell me, family is all we have, William. I took a step forward, voice trembling with anger and grief. You leave her out of this. She'd see you for exactly what you are, a coward who preys on children to feel powerful. For the first time, Wilbur hesitated. Just a flicker, but it was enough. Behind me, Amos rose. His voice was shaky but growing stronger. He's right. Wilbur's head snapped toward him. What did you say? Amos stepped forward, quilt slipping from his shoulders. His fists were clenched, his whole body trembling. But his eyes burned with something new. You don't own me, Amos said louder now. You never did. You're not my father. You're not even half a man. All you ever did was make me small, make me afraid, but not anymore. Wilbur's face went red with rage. You ungrateful little... He lunged. But I was faster. I met him head on. Years of pent-up fury giving me strength I didn't know I still had. His shoulders slammed into mine, and we crashed into the coffee table, splintering it into pieces. The room exploded into chaos, shouts, the crack of wood, the clang of Martha's picture frame falling to the floor. Wilbur swung wild, his fist grazing my cheek. Pain flared, but I didn't back down. I grabbed his collar, driving him backward into the wall. The drywall cracked. You will never touch him again, I roared. But Wilbur was strong, too strong. He shoved me off, sending me sprawling against the fireplace. My back screamed in pain, but adrenaline kept me moving. He advanced, fists clenched. You're done, old man. Before he could strike, Amos stepped between us. His voice shook, but it carried like thunder. No, you're done. The sight of that boy, my grandson, standing tall, defying his abuser, it fueled me like nothing else. I surged forward, grabbed Wilbur's arm, twisted hard. He howled in pain, dropping to one knee. I pressed him down, my breath ragged, my strength nearly spent. This ends now, I hissed. Red and blue lights flashed through the window. Sirens cut through the storm. Tires crunched on the icy driveway. The door banged open again, this time with authority. Police, hands where we can see them. Wilbur froze, chest heaving, face twisted in rage and humiliation. I released him and stepped back, raising my hands. Amos did the same. 2 officers rushed in, weapons drawn. On the ground. Now! Wilbur's defiance flickered, then crumbled. He dropped to his knees, hands behind his head. Cuffs clicked shut, cold and final. You can't do this, he shouted as they hauled him to his feet. This is my family. She'll regret this. You all will. His words echoed through the room, but they were hollow now, powerless. The officers dragged him out into the storm. The door slammed shut. Silence fell. I turned to Amos. He was shaking, not from fear this time, but from release. The dam had finally broken. Tears streamed down his face as he collapsed into my arms. It's over, Grandpa, he whispered. It's finally over. I held him tight, my own tears blurring the room. Yes, son, it's over. You're safe now. Truly safe. We sank onto the couch together, the fire still glowing faintly on the hearth. The storm outside raged on, but inside there was warmth, peace. For the first time in years, Amos smiled, not the forced, guarded smile I'd seen before, but a real one. Thank you, he said, voice steady, for believing in me, for fighting for me. I kissed the top of his head, my heart swelling with pride. No, Amos, thank you, for standing up, for finding your strength. Martha would be so proud. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows of my kitchen. Amos sat at the table, textbook spread out, a guitar propped against the chair beside him. He looked healthier, stronger, laughter spilling easily from his lips when his friends stopped by. College acceptance letter pinned to the fridge. Dean's list again, a future wide open. I poured myself coffee, leaned against the counter, and watched him with quiet joy. Martha's photo hung on the wall above us. I touched the frame gently. "You were right," I whispered. "Family is all we have, and I'll never let him go." The storm had passed. The boy was safe. And in that moment I knew we'd both finally come home.